10 passports you can combine with European ones, not necessarily to increase freedom of movement, but to obtain a second passport or a second nationality if you are Spanish by birth, French by birth, or naturalized by residency and want a second or third option. First, we have Mexico, because Mexico allows you to obtain a temporary residency at the consulate if you meet one of the criteria, such as economic solvency through income or a minimum balance in savings or investment accounts. Depending on the amount you have, may be granted permanent residency directly. Moreover, if you invest several hundreds of thousands of dollars in Mexico, you can obtain citizenship in less than 1 year without the need to physically reside there, thanks to the legal provision of citizenship by exception. If you prefer to live there without investing, you can obtain Mexican citizenship in just 2 years, spending 18 months within a 24-month period during permanent residency. During that time, you could be a tax resident but opt into the Recico fiscal system, where you end up paying 1 or 2%, or alternative, have offshore companies without falling under the refipres regime, which are similar to Mexico's citizenship rules. Many people consider having a child in Mexico to obtain permanent residence for the parents and citizenship for the child through birthright citizenship. However, it is recommended to obtain residency beforehand or do it in places where this is not frequently done to avoid institutional complications. As you may know, I'm resident in Mexico, living in Quintana Roo. I don't know yet if I will naturalize, but at least I am temporary resident, and in 3 years I will become a permanent resident for life. Next is El Salvador, a country often mentioned in recent years thanks to Bukele's policies. El Salvador's residency permit reminds me of those in Panama and the UAE. It can be based on income if you meet the minimum, or business creation like in Panama through the Friendly Nations visa, or in the UAE with a free zone company and your own residency permit. However, unlike Panama and the UAE, here you must contribute capital. I personally don't handle relocations to El Salvador except for the Citizenship by Investment program, which I will explain now, but I have a great lawyer whose office I can refer to you if you are interested. El Salvador operates under a territorial tax system, so all foreign income is taxed at 0%, including crypto gains. As a Spaniard, you are granted citizenship in just 2 years thanks to existing agreements. That means 1 year of temporary residency and 1 year of permanent residency, which they call definitiva. If you are not from a country with agreements, it usually takes 5 to 6 years. During those 2 years, you must live in the country most of the time, between 6 to 9 months per year, since the residency expires if you don't spend the minimum time there annually. El Salvador doesn't offer a residency you can obtain without being present, like those in Panama, Mexico, Paraguay, or even Mauritius. If you are not from Spain or from another Latin American country that have this agreement, okay, you need to spend 5 to 6 years in order to have the citizenship, and if you don't want to spend that full years, okay, there is always the investment option. It's the only active citizenship by investment program in the Americas in 2025, with a total cost of $1 million by donation. You can pay directly in crypto without the need for banking. It's the fastest passport obtained out of all the investment programs, since in less than 6 weeks you can have both the approval and passport in hand. You can include your spouse and children up to 18 years old. There is some flexibility if they are financially dependent on you, such as being students or unable to work. That said, with $1 million budget, better citizenships are available. It wouldn't be my first choice with $1 million, but if El Salvador keeps its current trajectory, don't be surprised if it gains more visa-free access and maybe even the US ESTA in the distant future, but not in the near future. However, if you have 50 million in crypto, plan to renounce your US citizenship, and the exit tax applies, don't lie and say you have nothing while buying the Salvadoran passport with crypto. The IRS isn't stupid. They have too much tech and data on their side. Moving on to the Caribbean, of the 5 active investment programs, the one I like most for its investment structure is St. Lucia. You invest $300,000 in interest-free bonds for 5 years, pay around $100,000 more in legal fees, due diligence and government charges, and get passports for all the family at less than $25,000 per person. However, I don't recommend St. Lucia for short-term goals, since there are cases where it's taking nearly 2 years to get the passport, despite being promised in 3 or 4 months. In that case, I would lean towards Antigua and Barbuda or Grenada, where donation or real estate investment options are available, and you typically get the passport within a year. The total cost ranges from $250,000 to $290,000 depending on the number of applicants. It's worth mentioning that the EU is cracking down all investment programs, ones, citing security concerns about wealthy individuals gaining access. Even if that's not really true, they use it as a pretext. Meanwhile, thousands enter undocumented and are still given citizenship, showing how hypothetical the discourse is. Depending on when you are watching this video, access to the Schengen zone or the US maybe have been restricted or may soon be possible with new travel bans or requirements like a 30-day stay within the first 5 years. Having mentioned Paraguay, we must talk about it more in depth, as it's become the go-to backup plan. You go, do the paperwork, and don't need to return for a year. Paraguay used to have one of the world's easiest permanent residencies in the world. Just deposit $5,000 in a Paraguayan bank. Now, you either invest at least $70,000 over time or get a temporary residency whose only requirement is not having a criminal record. You don't need to start a company or live there to keep it. You just need to spend 1 day per 365-day period. After 1 year and 9 months, it becomes permanent. Then, after 3 more years of permanent residency with sufficient ties and presence, you obtain citizenship, which is allowed alongside Spanish nationality, like in El Salvador. Paraguay uses a territorial tax system and has a maximum local tax of 10%. It also allows citizenship by exception, but this is tricky, requiring very selective law firms and connections, along with donations or investment of $250,000, $300,000, or even $500,000 in areas of special interest. If you're interested, fill out the form and we will review it together. This isn't something simple like buying 2 properties and getting citizenship. The country must benefit from your investment, maybe through local employment or national prestige. These are not as easy as traditional CBI programs where you meet requirements and pay. That's not how this works. We now move to its neighboring country, Argentina, a country that has recently changed the way to acquire citizenship. Previously, someone could enter the country illegally, stay 2 years, spending at least 6 months per year, and obtain citizenship without having had continuous legal residency. That has now changed. A new decree was recently issued stating that anyone who has not continued legal residency and has not spent the full 2 years, allowing for 0 day of absence, will not granted citizenship. And this is insane, as naturalizing in Argentina is now going to be extremely difficult. My personal belief is that this will eventually change. Maybe they will require 6 months or perhaps 10, like Chile, but allowing for justified absence abroad, because staying 2 full years in Argentina without being able to visit your family is a bit extreme. I understand that Argentina has been handing out citizenship, residencies, and public services for years, but for people who already have residency and want to naturalize after a few years, they should at least be allowed to travel and visit family. There are elderly people who simply cannot or don't want to go to Argentina now to visit their children, so I think they should leave some leeway. If they want to make it strict, let them set the bar at 11 months per year, for example, but no demand 365 exact days. The most common residency people apply for currently is the Rentista visa, as it has the most accessible requirements. Alternatively, many people are obtaining citizenship by exception in less than 1 year thanks to investments made within the country. But again, let me repeat, this is not like other exception programs you can apply to from abroad. Here, you must travel to Argentina, obtain legal residency, get your Argentine national ID, and only then you can apply, even if it's not for exceptional case. In fact, there are many scams in these Latin American countries because they all have the reputations for selling passports, claiming you can get one in less than 6 months for $50,000 by faking a birth certificate or by using an old certificate from your grandfather to claim descent, be extremely cautious. All this is reaching a point where Argentina could become a direct competitor to El Salvador, as it could develop the second formal citizenship by investment program for $500,000. The exact details of how and where the investment must be made are still unknown, but if we compare the 2 passports, the Argentine passport is initially better than El Salvador's one. Secondly, Argentina's option is not a donation like in El Salvador, but an investment. And thirdly, it's half the price. What remains to be seen is whether the processing time will be just as fast. Honestly, I doubt it. Considering the current requirements for naturalization, it wouldn't be surprising if it also takes 2 years, but without requiring physical presence, which I believe is possible, especially seeing what's happening in the Caribbean at the shutdown of Malta's program. Currently, taxation in Argentina is terrible, although in practice no one pays taxes if their business is abroad. This is technically wrong and shouldn't be happening, but in reality, they are not being caught. I believe that by the time this video is posted, the government may have already implemented better fiscal policies, although there is still a wealth tax that turns away many multimillionaires. Now let's hope that in October, if Milei gains a majority, he imposes a comprehensive new fiscal regime, with reasonable taxes, neither abusive nor excessively low, just fair. That way, many of his fellow citizens might not flee to Paraguay to pay 0 taxes and instead stay at home, live where they want, and pay moderate taxes. Next, I want to mention a Mercosur associate country, not because of the ease of getting citizenship, but because of freedom of movement movement its passport provides. It is the only country in Latin America that offers electronic visa-free access to the US, and that country is Chile. In Chile, you must stay 5 to 9 years to obtain citizenship, spending at least 10 months per year in the country. If you use birth tourism, the requirement is reduced by several years, but you must have prior residency. It doesn't work if you are there as a tourist or undocumented. In the past, many people in Argentina practice birth tourism since your child would immediately gain citizenship and the parents too. But now the parents receive at most a temporary residency and are still required to stay 2 full years. In Chile, it's a similar case. You may be able to reduce the required time, but 5 years remains the minimum, plus an additional 2 or 3 years for processing. So we are looking at 8 years total just to get the citizenship. This option is really only viable for people who have a strong life connection to Chile or are prepared to settle there for the next decade. Otherwise, it's not realistic for most people. That said, if you already hold multiple passports and your child is going to inherit yours, plus one from the country where they are born, like Chile, which recognizes birthright citizenship, then even if you don't gain Chilean nationality yourself, your child will, and they will have an amazing combo. Now let's move over to Europe, but not the European Union, because it wouldn't make sense to obtain another EU passport if your goal is diversification, for example in my case as a Spaniard. The first country in this region would be Serbia. Why Serbia? Because it offers citizenship by exception, which can cost between 350,000 euros and €500,000, and you can obtain it in less than 1 year. We have personally had cases where US citizens received it under 3 months within the passport already in hand. You can pay part in crypto, part in fiat, as they are very open to having you invest in the country, especially in less developed areas or regions needing improvement, as long as it benefits the Serbian population. Now I only consider this citizenship if you go through this route, because if you want to naturalize by residency with the standard 3-year minimum stay, then they will require you to renounce your Spanish citizenship or your other citizenship, and in 2025 that just doesn't make sense. You would be giving up one of the strongest passports in the world, one of the most valuable identity documents globally, both for freedom of movement and for opening accounts and registering with institutions. In the future, because of changes in the world, you want to renounce your French nationality, your Spanish nationality, or your nationality? Fine, do it, but only after you have secured a solid second option and a credible backup option from a country with international standing. Because if, for example, you choose Dominican Republic, a passport that many people mention, you will find it has a very little travel of freedom, and hardly any bank will want to onboard you with that document. Sure, if you inject millions, they will take you, but for the average person, that won't work. If instead of donating, you want to invest, consider Turkey. Its citizenship by investment program lets you put $400,000 in real estate, rent it for income, and then sell it after 3 years. You won't recover the full amount due to taxes and lira depreciation, but the passport may only cost 10 to 20% of the total investment. I think Turkey is a solid choice. It has consulate worldwide but lacks Schengen access, so you may keep your Spanish passport for Europe, for example, or later pair it with a golden visa or a Schengen-free last second passport like Serbia's. We used to favor Turkey's bank deposit option until 2024, when they stopped offering currency protection. Now it's just interest. Real estate seems more solid, especially since it requires $100,000 less. Men must complete military service, but exemptions are possible with the right process and a modest fee. It's crucial to plan this carefully so no family member must serve. We have covered Europe. I could mention Asia, but most countries either never naturalize foreigners due to strict jus sanguinis, or only offer citizenship by investment in Cambodia or honorary citizenship in the UAE if you invest tens of millions in a specific project. Instead, I want to highlight Mauritius in Africa, the option I referenced in my video about refugee in case of World War III. Mauritius doesn't have an easy residency for most, but it's a strong candidate for naturalization, offering one of Africa's best passports alongside Seychelles for mobility. In Mauritius, the process is the same regardless of residency type. You can apply for citizenship in just 2 years if you invest $500,000, in 5 years if you are a Commonwealth citizen, or in 7 years otherwise. The law also contemplates citizenship by exception, but few law firms handle these cases. From what I have researched, donations are likely similar to require $500,000 in investments. I personally don't know anyone who's obtained Mauritian citizenship by exception. To naturalize, you must reside continuously during the period, which is open to interpretation. It may mean over 183 days per year, or over 9 months, or possible no absence at all. These are the main options I see for EU citizens. Of course, many others exist, and we will explore them in future videos. Some involve time instead of money. Others suit those who can relocate, but need a second passport for business, mobility, or as a plan B. If that's you, fill out the form in the description so we can help you choose the best option.